Welcome, everyone, to Stats and Scheme with Tage and Shawn. I'm your co-host today, Tage Seth, here with Shawn Syed, coming off another really impactful week of football. Lots of stuff to talk about. Shawn, what topic do you want to talk about first today?
Tage, every week, you put out your weekend preview. It feels like you're clamoring for a game of the year, where I think we got one in week one, and I don't know, maybe you're not satisfied. We really finally get such an awesome primetime game with the Eagles beating the Chiefs 21-17, coming back from 10 points. Sloppy game at parts. There was obviously that rain that I think affected things. We'll talk about a bunch from that game. I just got through all the defensive film. I haven't even bothered watching the Eagles offensive film yet, but I was really, really impressed with what Shawn and the Eagles defense did. I think they were pretty married to having Kevin Byard on Travis Kelce in a bunch of situations. I think I pulled like 5 or 6 clips of them really just double teaming Travis Kelce in man coverage, that regular one double coverage. I think that was a good idea. And this was a game plan where they particularly came in and said, Chiefs, beat us with anyone else. And if you can't, then we're kind of happy with that. And then they were also, Desai and really the Fangio tree is not a big max pressure cover zero team. I think the Eagles ran it like 6 or 7 times from what I pulled out of that. And that was really surprising to me. That was not something that I expected them to do. Eagles had Nakobe Dean is injured, so they have, just less linebackers on the depth chart. They got into a big dime look a bunch. So you got 4 down linemen, only 1 linebacker on the field, and then now 3 safeties there. I think that gave them a little bit more coverage flexibility too. So Tej, why don't you talk about just a little bit how you felt about the game? Can we put that on the game of the year list, and kind of maybe some other thoughts about that matchup?
It should go on that list because it was an intense game. Like, you could feel between the two teams, especially Hurts and Mahomes, just like kind of the tension between these teams. And, Eagles were up 10 at halftime in the Super Bowl last year. Chiefs come back and end up winning. Chiefs are up 10 at halftime in this game, and the Eagles come back and win, which is pretty cool for sure. And yeah, I mean, everything you mentioned with the Eagles defense, like the Chiefs got held to a 28th percentile EPA per play, a 10th percentile success rate, one of the lowest outputs of the Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes era on offense. And they were just really bad on early downs, especially with some penalties and, incompletions and going away from the run there, which, is probably the right choice with all that. So they had a 7th percentile EPA per play on early downs, which just like continually put them behind the chain. And then, that when the Eagles can get into a 3rd down with expected pass situations, that's really where the pass rush and the strongest part of their defense and the defensive line can become unleashed. I think that was a big part of a lot of their success in this game. Even though the Chiefs converted a decent amount of late downs, they were, had converted 55% of them, which is 74th percentile. The Eagles were still putting them in so many of these situations that they just had the upper hand so many times in this game.
Yeah, I was interested when the numbers came out and you sent them my way because, of course, the Eagles get those 2 red zone turnovers. You have that Kevin Byard interception where he finally is able to get his hand on a ball. And then I think it was Bradley Roby who had a really nice punch out against Travis Kelce. So my first thought was, okay, is it going to be a game where they have a low EPA per play as expected based on those turnovers and then just be fine at success on a success rate measure? And I think, Tej, they were 10%, 10th percentile in success rate. Is that right?
Yeah, 10th percentile.
It's almost unbelievable. It feels like the Eagles defense hasn't really been able to have that much success in those ways. And then, of course, I think you bring up a good point. Like the Chiefs' late down success, it's so frustrating watching from the defensive end because it's like, okay, you can do whatever you want. Even the Eagles later on, we talked about it, like they got into different stunts that I think were not that you trap Mahomes, but you have a player in a better position. And like his 40 time is just like a touch faster than whoever's chasing him. It's just like such a ridiculous thing. But I know that you wanted to maybe mention those drops a little bit. How'd you feel about the drops? And also just as kind of a general thing for drops, like are drops a sticky stat? Do you think that's something that, from whatever you've seen or if you've been able to study it, like is that something carries over from year to year? Because I think the Chiefs, my guess is that they lead the league in drops right now. And it's unfortunate, but why don't you give us some thoughts there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you are right. The Chiefs do lead the league in drops. They mentioned that on the broadcast yesterday where they said that they have a league leading 26 drops right now. And Tom Bliss from the NFL put out a really good stat. And he said that, when you replace that Marquez Valdes-Scantling drop at the end of the game with a minute 50 left, that would have been basically the go-ahead touchdown for the Chiefs with an actual catch, that would have been an extra 42% of win probability added on that play for the Chiefs. Would have been the biggest jump of week 11, one of the biggest jumps in win probability on the season if you were to reverse the outcomes of different plays. So like, I think that is such an impactful drop. It was a really good ball by Patrick Mahomes. And, for MVS to end up dropping that ball, I think was devastating. But the next play, the 4th and 25, you end up having a Justin Watson drop that was a 50-50 ball that hit his hands as well. So I think that when you look at all this stuff together, like, it just kind of compounded for the Chiefs in this game. But drops in general are not very sticky, especially when projecting next year production. Like, when you look at drop rate year over year, there's a pretty low correlation of whether it's going to be predictive of the next year. So, I don't think it's necessarily like huge alarm bells for the Chiefs right now, but there is some cause for concern about just the receiving room in general. And I think if Travis Kelce can't take over these games like we saw for him last year, because of like what you mentioned with what the Eagles were doing to him with some of the double teams and stuff, I think that's going to be a problem. Is like, there's no Juju Smith-Schuster on this Chiefs team that can beat defenses at the secondary option.
And we know that you're Rashee Rice's biggest fan, but as what we were even talking about a little bit before the show, is it Shawn Desai doing an awesome job, or can you just look at and say, hey, look, if you make one catch, the Chiefs win this game? I think that both of those things can absolutely be true. I was really impressed because Desai used so many different coverages that like we haven't seen those sorts of things all year in different ways. And I think every week it feels like I'm impressed by them, even when they let up a lot of points to teams like the Commanders. So they're one of the few teams where I think that their like percentage of coverage used, it's like 10 or 15% for multiple different coverages. So they really are game plan specific. And you don't run this game plan unless you're playing a team where you feel pretty confident that you're not going to get beat by that second and third receiver. So as the Eagles get prepared for the Bills coming up on a short week, I'm interested to see, if you want to double Diggs, I really like Khalil Shakir. We'll talk about him. And then obviously Gabe Davis a little bit later in the week. Just flipping it over to the other side. I haven't watched I haven't watched one snap of the all 22 of the Eagles offense. Just on that TV copy, it felt like the Chiefs continue to do a great job with Spags. They do an awesome job where the offensive line will slide, say, towards the quarterback's right side, and the defense is only sending 3 that way, 2 linemen plus the nickel defender. But when they stunt with their linemen, it kind of traps your right tackle, Lane Johnson. Like, obviously, he's going to block that player when a person's running straight at him. So your quarterback isn't exactly hot where they're going to get to their answer where, hey, I know that we're kind of +1 on offense because the defense is sending a guy. Let me get the ball to my receiver really quick on a quick turnaround or something. So they do an awesome job of really, really messing with your offensive line and saying, hey, we're not going to like break your rules by overloading it, but we are going to get there by on like a standard 3-for-3 and get a free runner. It felt like the whole entire plane for the Eagles was built out of DeAndre Swift screens. And it was kind of that similar, like, hey, let me fake like I'm going outside and come back to the middle. That they used Dallas Goedert, I think, a few times on it in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. And I don't know, was your feeling for the Eagles offense just like general malaise? I felt like during so much of the game, my like confidence in their ability to score was quite low for I think a lot of the day.
I'm with you there. I think that some of the formation stuff that they did was pretty interesting. They did the Josh Heupel like double stack at one point, which is pretty cool. But what was interesting without Dallas Goedert, who, when I was kind of previewing this game, like I didn't think many people were talking about the loss of Dallas Goedert in this offense and what it could do to them. They had not run one play out of 10 personnel the entire season when Dallas Goedert was healthy, weeks 1 through 9. They have their bye week in week 10, and they come out in this game and they run 23% of their plays out of 10 personnel, and they were really good out of it. So I think it was something that the Chiefs defense hadn't seen this whole season from the Eagles, and the Eagles were able to get a 0.3 EPA per play, which would be equivalent to the best offense in the NFL out of 12 personnel. They passed 67% out of it. Like you mentioned, it was usually DeAndre Swift out there. And then the receivers that would play when they were in this 10 personnel lineup was obviously AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. Julio Jones, which they made that midseason signing, was playing 12 of these snaps, and Zacchaeus was also playing 12 of these snaps as well. So they were having their 4 receivers out there. They were able to pass out of it. They were able to have success out of it. 11 personnel with Jack Stoll, who I think could be a fine player eventually wasn't working out great in this game. And I think that's when you run that the majority of the game, like that's where the, like you mentioned, like some of the inconsistencies were coming from the Eagles in this game. But like it was good to see that they had somewhat of an answer to Dallas Goedert not being available to them, because I believe he's going to miss like 3 to 4 weeks here. And as we've talked about with the Eagles schedule, like these are really big games for them. So we're going to see how they continue to adjust without a very good tight end.
Yeah, I'm excited to look at the film. I think the first thing that pops, and obviously, pops on the TV copy too, is just Jason Kelce is so amazing. He's like, he is such a pleasure to watch. My assumption is, I mean, maybe if he has plans to retire at the end of the year, like at such a high level in clearly what the last phase of his career is absolutely incredible. Like I was watching with my dad and he was like Shawn, like most teams don't have centers that do that, right? And I'm like, yeah, great point, Dad. That's exactly true. Like it is such a addition to be able to have that where you can, pin down with one of the guards and fold Kelce kind of around that. It gives you so many different answers versus defensive fronts. And I think it's pretty clear that Jalen Hurts' knee is not 100%. And at this point, it's just not going to be 100% for the rest of the year. But there was that great clip where I think that I got to watch it again on the TV copy, but it looks like Hurts kind of wants to move the run in a different direction. And Kelce's like, no, absolutely not. Like I know it. I can feel it. And even watching just how they do the protections, and so much is really, it feels like all of it almost is through Kelce, where he's able to point and then change that point so late, because the Chiefs did a really good job of messing with their fronts and changing it late in the snap count, where the Eagles offense, it felt like a lot of times they were snapping the ball with like 3, 2, 1. And then at that point, the Chiefs defense, they know exactly when they can rotate. And I was happy to see, Devontae Smith had a really good game. I think AJ Brown clearly didn't get as much as he would have wanted to. There was that interception where he had an awesome forced fumble, but obviously, when the shins hit each other, they counted as down by contact. And on that play, I thought, I do have to watch it again on the all 22. My assumption is like he very clearly has an in route, but obviously, he just killed the corner, so he wants to go ahead and kind of break that off vertical. But the reason why sometimes you don't want to do that is obviously the defense is blitzing, and sometimes you have that ability to get open on that route because of the defensive structure in a way. I wrote that Hurts is playing like an MVP article last week, which you can check out on sumersports.com. And in the first half, Paige, let me tell you, I wasn't feeling too great about it. I sent you some texts like, man, should I have waited on it? But that one, I think by the end of the game felt good. So looking at the simulation on sumersports.com, if you just press league, I like it. It's fun to go through. I think the Eagles now have the highest chance to be the Super Bowl champions. I think that's the first week where they're at that. They've overtaken the Chiefs. And then they have, I think by our simulation, it's like 10,000 simulations. And then Tage, correct me if I'm wrong, but of that, 73% of them have them where they get the bye week. So how do you feel about the Eagles getting the 1 seed? Do you think that anyone else has a chance to get there? The Eagles' upcoming games are Bills, Niners, Cowboys again, and then they get the Seahawks before Giants, Cardinals, Giants. So they have a little bit, obviously, of an easier schedule towards those last 3. But then the Lions, of course, they have a stretch of their schedule where I think they only play 1 outdoor game. The 49ers, of course, are just back to full health. How do you feel about the Eagles' chances to get the 1 seed? And do you think anyone's going to be able to catch them there?
Yeah. I know with the 1 seed race, I think, obviously I had a rooting interest in this game against the Eagles, rooting for the Lions to get the 1 seed there. But when the Eagles can just keep winning in so many different ways, like they have, like, yes, their win record is not directly correlated with like their Pythagorean wins or their point differential or something along those lines. Like they have won more games than maybe some of their underlying metrics would say. But like, I think it's starting to show that like 2 seasons in a row of this, where they're just able to grind out wins. Like it's very impressive coaching from head coach all the way down to the coordinators. And then like, I think Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown on offense just understand like what they have to do to make these wins happen. Like, I mean, that the offense wasn't doing much, if anything, for a lot of that first half going into the second half, but you still can hit that Jalen Hurts to Devontae Smith deep ball that completely changes the game, puts the Eagles ahead. And so, yeah, when you look at the 1 seed, like it is the Eagles kind of area to lose ground in. Like they are looking really good for their chance to win the 1 seed. I would think that the 49ers would have a better chance than the Lions of getting the 1 seed. And our simulations reflect that. 49ers are at a 13.7% chance to get the 1 seed, and Lions are at 8.9%, just because Lions defense has faltered, as we'll talk about later in the show. And the 49ers look really good right now. But yeah, if the Eagles can get through, they've already gone through half of this really tough stretch, beating the Dolphins, Cowboys, and now this game against the Chiefs. The second half of this stretch is again going to be difficult, but I just have more confidence in them to keep winning these games, even if Jalen Hurts is not 100%. And as he works towards getting healthy, that bye week will be super crucial for that if they end up getting it.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I like that you mentioned, winning in different ways, Pythagorean wins. I think it's like such an interesting kind of statistical point and kind of how you approach it. Obviously, last year, I covered the Vikings, and they're a team where they were 13-4. But I think it's fair to say that they were probably not as good as a 13-4 record. But like with the Eagles, even if you think, okay, they're in these one-score games where their offense isn't humming and they end up coming out with these wins, there's something that like it is hard to quantify, but they're so unflinching in these moments where I think Hurts has won something like 7 consecutive games where he's down 10 in the second half. And obviously that is a product of, being able to have a defense that's able to make stops. 2 of those games against the Commanders, they aren't, the best teams in the world, but I really love like the touchdown to Devontae Smith. Hurts checks into that. And that is like such a confident moment to me where he just loves doing that. Like he will take that shot consistently. And I think that that's something that makes me feel confident about the Eagles offense, because it really just takes one of those throws. He made like 3 huge plays throughout the day, and that's kind of it. So that's going to be interesting to keep on tracking. And then next week they get the Bills. We'll talk about the Bills now. They're really just, I think we can just focus on their offense, Tej, and their offense. The Bills offense this week looked a whole lot like the Bills offense, right? We talked last week that it wouldn't be kind of this wholesale change where you see everything just go out the window just because a new offensive coordinator comes in. Obviously, that Ken Dorsey, obviously through Brian Dable, that system is still in place, and it's hard to just undo it overnight. I do think, we saw Josh Allen measure his aggression a little bit, and I think part of that was design based on the offense had a bunch of plays where it is so set up for the ball to go to the running back in the flat, whether it's, that play action quick one. I think it was Tyler Johnson who ends up throwing that touchdown to, or just like picks for the running back and getting them into space. So, if we think that the offensive coordinator was like, oh yeah, Josh, like just stop throwing interceptions, I think that is just a reductive way to look at it. I do think his ADOT, his average depth of target, was a fair bit lower. I'm not sure where it ranked on the season, but again, to me, like designing plays where it's built in that, hey, this ball is more likely than not going to go to the running back pretty quick. I think that's a good way to kind of get him into that mindset. At the same time, he had that almost interception on the goal line, but then he had that just ridiculous ball to Khalil Shakir where it's that vertical in space. And it's just like, okay, well, like you need him to hit those home runs. He can hit those home runs at any time. What are you going to do about it? So for the Bills offense, how'd you feel about them? What kind of did the numbers say in that game against the Jets?
Yeah, I like a lot of what you said there. I agree with a lot of what you said. The Bills actually, interestingly, and going against a really good Jets defense, only had a 15th percentile success rate. But like you brought up, it was just built off explosives, like especially that Khalil Shakir touchdown. That was a phenomenal throw. And the aggressiveness part, I do think maybe is something that you can take away from this game. Like, again, like I like Joe Brady. I liked Ken Dorsey. Like, I don't know if a ton is going to change, but maybe Joe Brady has some type of way to get Josh Allen into doing different things. Like I already thought he was playing well this year for sure, but there's areas to improvement for sure. And so Josh Allen has an 8.3 average depth of target on the season. In this game, it was 5.8. So it jumped down a lot. Like that's an 11th percentile average depth of target. We've talked about on the show before how average depth of target doesn't correlate with efficiency like it used to. In 2020, there was a strong correlation between average depth of target and efficiency. You think about the types of defenses that were being played then, more single high, more aggression, versus now where it's more build the dome and force these really, especially really high-end quarterbacks, but all offenses to make shorter passes. But this was exactly the type of game that reminds you of Josh Allen's ceiling. Like it was an 82nd percentile EPA per pass. When he was dropping back, you felt very comfortable with where the offense was. And then like I also thought James Cook had a good day as well. So like you can start to see some of these pieces coming together for the Bills offense, where it's not only just Stephon Diggs, it's Dalton Kincaid and James Cook and Khalil Shakir, where if they can step up and have these bigger games, like I think that's really helpful, because I know that there was a sneaky loss of Nyheim Hines before the season started that I think was kind of under discussed in the grand scheme of things, but now they're starting to find other options when it comes to receiving. And I think that's going to be really important for them going forward.
I think they also may have attacked the middle of the field just a little bit more than they usually do. I think that's a smart way to do it. That's, obviously that's what Kyle Shanahan, like his goal is able to find just open receivers over the middle of the field. And the Bills doing things like using heavy play action, draw those linebackers in, or even they do a lot of play action out of gun, where I think this game they use some motions to make it feel a little bit better and find those spaces, obviously right behind the linebacker in front of those safeties where Allen can just zip those balls in. Like it seems like it's just easy for him. And I think that for the Eagles, right, they go from Mahomes to Allen, like just rough, right? You got to play these two awesome AFC quarterbacks. But obviously I wonder how much is their plan going to be similar in terms of, how do you want to keep the quarterback in the pocket? Because when he's in the pocket, like he's able to just kind of throw it over you. He can throw it through you. He can do all these different things. And maybe, the Bills receiving threats overall would, I think it's fair to say they're better than the Chiefs. And then the Bills spread to run so much, so they'll get into more of those spread out sets. Mm-hmm. And I think the Eagles sometimes have a little bit of trouble playing run defense against those sets, especially I think Jordan Davis, he seems like he may have gotten a little bit banged up, and the Chiefs were able to have success in the run game, particularly on the edge, where I wonder a lot of those examples where the Eagles are in man coverage on the outside. So that makes it difficult. So is it like a zone heavy game plan from the Eagles overall? I think that's going to be a fun one that we learn a lot from on, I think it's Sunday in that middle slate. Anything else you got on the Bills offense, Tej?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like the point that you brought up with the spread to run there, because the Bills, like, interestingly in this game, and I don't know, again, if this is just like a game specific thing or something that Joe Brady wants to do going forward, where I think we're going to find that out in these next couple of weeks here, but they had a negative 6.5% pass rate over expected in this game. They were running the ball a lot, and they had a plus 3.9% pass rate over expected on the season coming into this game. So maybe it was a product of facing a Jets defense where teams actually do have a negative 5% pass rate over expected against them the whole season. Teams like to run on them, obviously given their defensive backs and the strength there. And the Eagles teams have a tendency of passing a lot on them because of their defensive line and some of the injuries that they've had in the secondary. So now we're going to start to see if Joe Brady is the type of offensive coordinator to have these very game-specific plans, or if he just maybe likes running the ball a little bit more. And then I'm also curious to see how they use the middle of the field against the Eagles. In week 1 against the Jets, they only had 7% of their passes go over the middle of the field. That was a big problem for Josh Allen to keep throwing those outside passes, led to all those interceptions in this game. 18% pass rate over the middle of the field in this game against the Jets in week 11. And coming into this game, the Jets with their outside corners were allowing a very negative EPA when throwing left or right, but they were allowing a positive EPA per pass when throwing over the middle of the field. So again, maybe that's a game-specific thing that Joe Brady wants to do. Maybe it's something that he wants to tap into from middle of the field standpoint. And we might see that again in the Eagles game, given that they're kind of the same way with Slay and Bradbury locking down the outside, and then the middle of the field being like an area of weakness for them.
Yeah, and locking things down on the outside, that's such an important thing for a defense. And let's finally have the conversation about the Broncos defense. You said we had to have it, obviously coming off that game against the Vikings with the win, and now they're building that win streak. So the Broncos defense, it's just interesting. I think we'll have a good conversation about it. Early in the season, we remember that not so stellar game against the Dolphins. It seems like they tried to carry over, and they are carrying over a lot of that Fangio and Evero stuff. But I think some things weren't hammered out, like their coverage bust here and there. But just from a structural standpoint, when you have that star cornerback in Pat Surtain, like you can do things that other teams can't, where you're locking up the backside of 3-by-1 and just flooding the whole entire defense away from it. You can cloud like star receivers in different ways because you have versatility if you want to put your best cornerback on a second receiver. And just like he is just awesome, like through and through. Even when he's playing quarters technique, it feels like he has things locked up. So there's just a lot of things you can do. But the Vikings Broncos game, I thought that was interesting. Again, it feels like we see that Kevin O'Connell just really has the juice, just extending. Dobbs has crazy plays. But all right, let's just talk about kind of like the Broncos defense at a high level. So you did a bunch of digging into the numbers. We'll talk about that just absurd turnover streak. What are the numbers? What are your feelings about the Broncos defense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like the Dolphins game, they had the like one of the worst statistical outputs in recent NFL history, allowing 100th percentile EPA per play, 100th percentile success rate. But since that game, or really since week 7, which is kind of what I was looking at for the Broncos, 49th percentile success rate allowed, 23rd percentile success rate allowed in week 8, which was their best game of the season. They had the bye in week 9. And then these past 2 games against the Bills and the Vikings was 83rd percentile and 72nd percentile. So they weren't great performances from a success rate standpoint. However, they were great performances from an EPA standpoint, and that comes from the turnovers that they were forcing. Since week 7, they ranked 10th in EPA per play allowed, but 28th in success rate allowed. So they are playing as bend not break defense as you can play recently, and it's really showed up. Like they've had 51 total EPA on turnovers since week 7, which is the most in the NFL. 12 turnovers in that time span, which is basically three turnovers a game in that window of games that I'm looking at here. So when you're forcing 3 turnovers a game, not necessarily sustainable, but it's very, very good for winning these games. And that's why they've been able to play so much better these past couple of weeks, is they've just been able to force turnovers at the right time. And I think that's really good for them right now. I don't know if it's going to last, but it's been huge in this winning streak that the Broncos are on.
Okay, those wins count. We can't take away from them no matter how sustainable it is. But the sustainability point is interesting to me because whenever, if it's a quarterback that throws a bunch of interceptions, like you want to look at those and say, all right, well, is this something that's fundamental to that player? Is it fundamental to the team? And this game, they had, I think, 2 fumbles on run plays and then kind of hit Dobbs' arm on an interception. To me, it feels like they're not a team that is going to rank towards the top in terms of like pressure percentage and things like that. And that's something that I would just love to have. Like if you're a team that forces turnovers, or even if your sack percentage is kind of low, if your pressure rate is kind of high, that's usually indicative of a team who's able to kind of force those big splash plays on the defensive end. But I think, success rate, obviously that's the more kind of efficiency. EPA is the more that'll capture those explosives more. But okay, if you could just pick one, which I know, Tage, how can I make you pick between your children, EPA per play and success rate? If you could just choose one of those 2, and you're only good in one of those stats for one game and then over a season. So first we'll go for one game. If you could just choose one of those 2 that you ranked better at, would you rather be like we have a great EPA per play, but we had awful success on the defensive end, or the opposite direction?
Yeah, this is a great question. For one game, it would have to be EPA, because EPA is such a descriptive stat. Like when you're analyzing teams, and when we do our playoff previews and different stuff like that, like I'll lean on EPA a lot because it really tells you the story of the season.
Okay, and then would it be the opposite then for season long, where you say, hey, we'd rather be a defense that, or is it just like, let's just force 3 turnovers every game? We can do it. Football's a small sample size sport. Or do you think that, you want to be like, say we're entering the playoffs as a team, we have a really like a bad EPA, but we're quality on success rate. Does that to you feel like, okay, maybe it's a team that will be able to find success where turnovers can regress a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Like if we're sitting here end of regular season, about to enter the playoffs, I would want to lean more. I would want to have a higher success rate, or higher ranking success rate wise, because I would feel like that would be more sustainable carrying over into the playoffs, especially if there's a big gap. If we were, 5th in EPA per play allowed, but 20th in success rate allowed, I'd feel much worse about the defense than that if that was vice versa.
Yeah, it's always hard for me to determine like what is like fundamental to this team, because to me, saying, well, this is a defense that causes turnovers, well, why is that? Is it because they've played like 6 quarterbacks who maybe aren't the best and they're getting like just jump balls thrown out to them? Is it that like the Cowboys to me are a good example? Like their pass rush is so good. They are able to get those one-on-ones up front. Micah Parsons is going to speed everything up. And then they play tight man coverage and those cornerbacks are able to get after it. So when Deron Bland has like whatever it is, like 4, 5, or 6 pick sixes, to me, not that necessarily pick sixes are sustainable, but that to me feels a little bit more like a team where they can go into every game saying, we are able to force turnovers because of the way that we pressure quarterbacks, as opposed to a team where, of course, I think that coaching the punch out on fumbles is absolutely something that is a skill, and certain players I think are probably better at it than others, but it's so hard to bank on those from a game to game basis. But all right, we had our conversation about the Broncos defense. I know you really want to.
Yeah,
one thing I'll say about go ahead. What do you got?
The Broncos defense is, you talk about fundamental there, and like I think that's something really good to bring up. What I think that the Broncos defense is really good at is taking away your wide receiver one. Like that's something I feel confident that they'll continue to do because Surtain is so good. Like you were talking about earlier, like when you look at Stephon Diggs, 3 receptions, 34 yards against them. Jordan Addison, 3 receptions, 44 yards. I counted Rashee Rice as the Chiefs wide receiver one, 4 receptions, 56 yards. And then if you go back to week 8 when they played the Packers, no receiver on the Packers had over 30 yards. A.J. Dillon was their leading receiver for that game. So I don't know who the Packers wide receiver one is. I still think they're figuring that out. But it just goes to show you that wherever you stick Surtain, you can take away their wide receiver one, and maybe that's forcing these quarterbacks and these teams to feel the pressure to be more aggressive, to less receivers that they trust less. And like, that's what's forcing these turnovers. And if the Broncos can keep relying on that, I think that's something that's going to be promising for them. Again, like we talked about how it might not be sustainable, but as long as you have that true lockdown corner, it's always going to give you a better chance than defenses that might not have that type of stuff, but are still putting up similar numbers right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Tish. I'm glad that we got that extra 2 minutes in about the Broncos defense, because that is so true. If you're a defense, no matter how many turnovers you cause, if you have that stud on the outside like that, and man, he is just like, he's incredible. He's so much fun to watch. Just his fluidity. Even I think he had a pass interference in the game against the Vikings, but his ability, especially in that cover 4 technique where it feels like, okay, is he kind of in zone where he's locking up those receivers? That's a lot of fun. I think another team that's fun to watch, maybe not as fun to watch till the end of the game on Sunday, but we'll talk about the Lions Bears. Going to go Lions offense first. You saw those Jared Goff interceptions. We talk about turnovers and how like sticky those are. 1 is 2 is tight end, where the tight end kind of gets hit by a safety rotating down. I think you could probably forgive that. On the second interception, they're running a high-low. The linebacker takes that low piece, but then the backside linebacker comes across for a really nice interception, which was just, I thought it was really good defense. Later in the game, they use that backside concept again, where they pull that linebacker that made the interception out of the space, and Goff was able to make that throw. The third interception, it was tipped at the line, but didn't look great. And then you have 2 other throws that they easily couldn't have been intercepted. There was, I think, one on the goal line and then one closer to the end of the game. So not a banner day in the interception throwing, or maybe whatever your interceptable throw rate is for the Lions. But I mean, who cares when you have the Lions rushing attack? It was a really, really fun game. I think whenever we talk about running games in general, I like to look at, well, how are the double teams working? Do they get to the second level? And then can an offense kind of threaten you in every gap? Not that you have to run 800 different runs, but to me, it's important that an offense can handle different defensive fronts within their core runs. And the Lions just absolutely do that. I did a video last week where the Lions offensive line, they have the same double team where it's like the center and the right guard have the defensive tackle up to the linebacker. But even within that, it's so adjustable where if the linebacker blitzes, the center is able to do kind of a good job getting back there and making that block. So I love watching the Lions run game. I think they get to the second level very well. Sometimes they'll just like have guys that run out there really quickly, which is fun to watch. I know that you probably didn't feel as great about the passing offense for a lot of the game, but when you have Ben Johnson calling runs on 3rd and 5, you're living the dream. So Tish, how'd you feel about the Lions offense in that game, and what'd you want to say about their performance?
Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy game to watch. Went through a lot of emotions for sure. But like, I mean, yeah, like the Lions 95th percentile success rate in this game, 65th percentile EPA per play, even with the 3 interceptions, and they had a kickoff that they fumbled as well pretty early in the second half. So 4 turnovers, -3 turnover differential on the day to pull out that win. I think you got to feel pretty lucky that you're able to walk away with that. But like I think the Lions could have put up, 45 points in this game with the way that they were moving the ball if it wasn't for the turnovers, but obviously part of the game. And like you mentioned, the running game, 0.22 EPA per rush, which would be one of the most efficient passing games in the league. But they had that in the run game, and they were really, really good on late downs, converting 73% of them in this game. And like when you're able to support both David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs as rushers, I think that's a great spot to be in. I think the offensive line and the schemed up run concepts have been really impressive this season as they were last season. And like, it's exactly what you wanted to see from Ben Johnson and the Lions run game so far. David Montgomery ranks 4th in EPA per rush on the season. Jahmyr Gibbs ranks 8th in EPA per rush. So you have 2 running backs that are top 8 in generating, positive EPA on their rushes. I think that's a true testament to just the blocking and the scheme that they have in front of them. And when you can rely on something like that, when the passing game isn't as good as you want it to be, I think that's important. And the Bears had a top 3 rushing defense coming into this game from an EPA per rush standpoint. And the Lions were able to run on them pretty much all game, which was really encouraging, I think, for the future.
Yeah, just a small thing from the Lions. They ran the kind of same concept for Gibbs and then for Montgomery at 2 different points from shotgun. And Gibbs ran it to the same side of the formation where he's like taking a step back and going. And then when Montgomery ran it, he's on the opposite side. So he gets a running start. That could definitely just be like a running back comfort thing. But to me, it was like, okay, they understand that Gibbs and Montgomery are obviously different and they have different comfort. And what they ran in college is different. The way that Gibbs ran Alabama, and it was just like, okay, like this is such a smart, well thought out offense, even on these little things where David Montgomery is obviously like, he can use a running start, where I think Gibbs can get to that kind of top speed a lot quicker. All right, this is probably an unfair question, but the Lions, to me, that game was very much like they had high success rate. They were obviously lower EPA based on those interceptions. If you could just choose the Lions offense or the Eagles offense for one game, coaching staff considered and everything. I know this is unfair. That I don't like doing rankings. I don't like doing this, but like, give me your decision. If you just one game, Lions offense or Eagles offense.
Oh, that's a tough question. The 2 teams that we watch the most between the 2 of us, I would probably go with the Eagles offense because they have more answers to different things that can be thrown at them. I think because of Jalen Hurts' scrambling ability, his pocket mobility, I think Jared Goff is executing a really well-designed offense this year that has good weapons in St. Brown and Laporta. But when he gets pressured, or when the offensive line is having an off day, you can really start to see the Lions offense fall apart. We saw that in the Ravens game where they laid a goose egg for most of the game. The Eagles offense doesn't really have days like that, right? Like because of the floor that Jalen Hurts gives them from a rushing standpoint, I think that it's a lot harder to shut them out for like the entire game or something like that. Where do you kind of stand on that pick and choose there?
Oh man, yeah. Gosh, I figured you'd kind of point it back in my direction. I feel like I lean Eagles too. I think that was actually a really good point that I didn't think of initially, that the Eagles, they have so many different ways to get there, where it feels like it's a lot of times matchup based for the Eagles. And then on the Lions, it feels a little bit more kind of schematic based. I mean, Lions run game is so fun to watch. And I mean, why does Ben Johnson just get someone wide open every single time they run that inverted flood with Jameson Williams again? But yeah, and then I mean, it's kind of lame to be like, oh, the Eagles are experienced and they've kind of been there before. I think there may be some truth to that. I hope that these 2 teams face each other in the NFC Championship game. Then we can have a real long discussion about it. But just clean up that Bears-Lions game. The Bears, Tage, you know that I can't quit Justin Fields. See some good from the offense there. They use Field in a bunch of different ways in the run game. They use like his run action as part of play action, which is so fun to see. The defense has players in spots that run scrape exchanges. They have a defensive end kind of surf technique and stay there, but Fields just still makes people miss. So that's always fun. And then he's able to take those shots down the field and get those posts to DJ Moore, who's just an awesome tracker of the football. But we don't need to talk about the Bears. We'll move into Thanksgiving. We got Packers at Lions, Commanders at Cowboys, 49ers at Seahawks. But obviously the most important question, Tish, who is the musical guest that you're looking forward to the most on Thanksgiving?
This is a great question. I saw like the full list. Jack Harlow is at Packers, Lions. Dolly Parton is Commanders, Cowboys, and then Steve Aoki is 49ers, Seahawks. I saw Dolly Parton at the Tennessee Georgia game, like on the broadcast. She was walking with Peyton Manning, and I don't think I've can name a Dolly Parton song, so that probably rules her out. But I have to go with Jack Harlow, Detroit guy. Top number 1 song right now on the top 50 charts when I was looking on Spotify today. I'm very excited for his performance. I hope the Lions don't do what they did last year, where they kind of stuck the musical guest in like the corner of the stadium because they didn't want to mess up the turf or whatever mid-game. I hope they actually put Jack Harlow on the field, because I think that Ford Field is going to be really loud on Thursday when you have an 8-2 team that's competing for the 1 seed, coming off a crazy win against the Bears and playing a division rival. Like I think anyone going to that game should be really excited about how the energy in the stadium is going to look like.
Well, Tish, all the Dolly Parton fans that are loyal listeners to the Stats and Scheme podcast are going to be coming after you. So I hope that you're prepared for that. I mean, come on, let's give Steve Aoki some love. I'm hoping that 49ers Seahawks game, let's get like super, techno EDM electric. Let's really do that. Hopefully, I'm hoping that game is really good because obviously the Eagles will get the 49ers after they get the Bills. And, the 49ers in their full health, are they the best team in the league? I'll just whisper that here as we get to the close of the podcast. Also, we got Texans Jaguars this week, and then I think it's Ravens Chargers. So just the Thanksgiving slate, whatever you want to think about it, Sunday is going to be a lot of fun. We'll see if you write your game previews and say, we're going to get another game of the year this week. Maybe we'll hold off on that. But how are you feeling about, we got Thursday, we got Dolphins Jets on Friday. Like, what's your plan? Is it going to be you're just like, should we just strap you into a couch, get you an IV or something? Or are you going to be able to do some walking this week?
And yeah, an IV of gravy actually, I think could work for this week. But I mean, this is really the best stretch of the year that we'll have in football because, like you said, like three games on Thursday. We have the Black Friday game, which I'm still going to watch every second of, no matter who the Jets quarterback is. Like I just want to watch football on Black Friday. We have the lowest total in college football history also on Friday, Iowa, Nebraska at 26.5. That's not a team total. That's the total for the whole game. And then Saturday is rivalry week, Ohio State, Michigan, lots of big games. The Washington State, Oregon State, like really fun games there. And then like you mentioned on Sunday, and then even an intriguing Monday night game with Vikings Bears. So just like 5 straight days of football, like you really can't beat this. Like I'm sure you're really excited for it, like I am here.
Yeah, I I don't watch a ton of college football, at least live. I like watching all 22 kind of during the off season. Sometimes there's whatever your feelings on college football. But yeah, Ohio State, Michigan, that's a really fun one. I just can't get over 26 is the total for the Iowa Nebraska game.
Yeah, 26.5, the lowest ever recorded.
That is something special. Yeah, I love every week Tej usually sends out this great tweet where it's like the lowest total and the highest total. It's like, this is the same sport. And it's wild that you get these totals that are like 75 and then to get something close to 25 is awesome. Bye. Let's get out of here, Tej. We talked about a gravy IV. That gives me deep concerns. You know that I'm not a doctor. We both have some doctors in our family. We'll consult them. Appreciate everyone listening. Thanks for hanging out with us on Stats and Scheme. Tell us what you like, what you didn't like, and if Tej owes Dolly Parton a personal apology, make sure you let us know. Be sure to listen to Eric and Thomas on Mondays and Wednesdays. Take a visit to sumersports.com. Take a look at those team tables. Press that league button, especially as we get close to the playoffs. I think there's a lot of good things there that we can get information of. Everyone enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy all those halftime acts on Thanksgiving Day.